In the news recently, we've heard a lot about the Commonwealth Games, which are to be staged in Glasgow again next spring, sometime early summer. I can't remember exactly the date, so forgive me. But we have been lumbered with this task all over again. Now, I say lumbered because there are arguments that have been made in the past that staging events such as the Commonwealth Games produces a commercial payback to the city which hosts these games. Now, I was around in 2014 during the Commonwealth Games then, and I remember the aftermath of that. And there were no claims that people had made money out of these Commonwealth Games, except perhaps a few very large international hotel chains owned by people like Donald Trump and the Hilton family. So the only real benefit, commercially or otherwise, for the Commonwealth Games was for big international private hotel companies and maybe a few other larger firms that were used to help stage the event. Because if you remember, the Commonwealth Games was actually staffed by volunteers, Scottish volunteers who volunteered to help show people to the venues, take tickets, so on, and just generally police the event, as well as using a huge number of Scottish police officers, basically to keep order and make sure that there was no crime during the visit of the many people who took part. Now, the Commonwealth Games, I caused a bit of a Twitter storm because every now and again I like to go on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days, and say something. Not very often, because it's a cesspool of hatred and loathing and insults and abuse, and I knew that when I made my post. And my post was quite simple. I just said that Norrie Hunter and I believed that the Commonwealth Games for next year should be renamed the Colonial Games. And that comment provoked outrage among some of the more strident unionist supporters. And my account was flooded with fake bot accounts calling me all sorts of names and making ridiculous claims about how inaccurate this was and what a pathetic person I was, and Norrie Hunter and I were just idiots. So that's the kind of thing you would expect when you press the bruise of unionism, and when you start picking away at it, the unionists really get upset, because if you start saying that the union's in its last days and we're seeing the start of its gradual disintegration in Scotland, they get really cross, because the last thing they want is their nice safe lives. Most of the time these people are employed either by British institutions or the Ministry of Defence, for example, or big multinational corporations which are based in Britain, like BAE Systems, for example, the weapons manufacturer, and other big interests in Scotland, particularly in the oil industry, the energy industry, and so on. And that's because most of the companies which invest in these major firms in Scotland are there to exploit whatever Scotland has. Its natural energy resources, for one, its location for positioning its highly dangerous nuclear weapons as far away from London as possible, and things like that. So when you start saying stuff like this, you naturally trigger them. Now, was it my intention to trigger them? Yeah, it was. I was being a bit naughty, and I don't mind admitting that. But I was doing it for a reason. I really wanted to express my opinion and the opinions of many countless Scots who do not believe in the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth itself was a fig leaf which the British state used after people had kicked Britain out of their countries as colonisers, where they had had their resources ripped off, extracted, and got nothing back for hundreds of years. And then Britain turns around and says, let's all be friends again, and just, the past is the past. Let's all have some games and we'll all compete against each other on equal terms. Except that the Commonwealth Games are not conducted on equal terms. I mean, it's pretty well known that England has a massive sports budget compared to, say, Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, or many other smaller nations that the United Kingdom colonised over the decades when it was called Great Britain. So these Commonwealth Games are not, there's no Commonwealth in it. There is just the wealth of England, which is the colonising agency, basically, which benefited from ripping off the resources of everybody else. And now they're sharing this as some kind of commonwealth, that we're all in it together. These countries that have signed up to play sports in these games don't think of it that way at all. I mean, the odds are stacked heavily against them, for one thing, because they don't have anything like the sports investment budget which England has, and neither do we in Scotland. So it very much is the colonisers playing games with the colonised, who they know are not going to be able to compete on the same level as they do, because they simply do not have the same infrastructure and the same investment in sports training which England has had. Because one of the things that England loves is to project not force by warfare anymore, but project its power through sports. And this is one way of doing it, having the Commonwealth Games. Now, they've always been seen as the poor relation of the Olympic Games, which is a far bigger competition and much more illustrious and includes everyone. Now, before you start complaining, there are a few countries that compete in the Commonwealth Games which may not have been British colonies to begin with. And they've joined in the fun because maybe their next door neighbours are doing it. But that's beside the point. This is still a colonial event. And this is inviting your former victims round for a game of cricket, basically. That's what this amounts to in sort of metaphorical terms. Is it worth it, though? Is there any commercial benefit? Well, not really. And, you know, you have to wonder why it was that Scotland ended up with this event again. And the reason for it is that Australia, which has perhaps a larger population than Scotland, is probably a good bit wealthier than we are, and has lots of facilities, refused to hold the games. And their complaint was that it was not going to pay back. There was not going to be any commercial benefit from it. It was just going to cost a fortune. So lo and behold, we end up catching the baby that was thrown out with the bathwater and left holding the baby again for the second time. Of course, the last time was 2014, when we were fighting the independence referendum at the same time as this was going on. But remember, the Commonwealth Games was not decided by Scotland. We didn't decide to take it. That decision was taken for us by London. Why didn't London want it? If it's so great, why didn't London do it? Because they've got all the facilities and all the money and the training grounds and all the rest of it to do it. Why give it to us? And my guess is that because it's going to cost Scotland money. It's going to cost Glasgow a lot of money to stage it again, although we do have stadiums which were built, some of which for these events, but we have the wherewithal to do it. But it's going to cause mayhem in the city all over again. If you lived in Glasgow in 2014 that summer, you'll remember that most of the roads in the west side of the city were shut. I couldn't operate my own business for 2 weeks the way I would like to have done. I was limited to working in a completely different part of the city because of this. And I guess that many other people who make their livings on the roads, making deliveries, things like that, were also going to be similarly affected. Only the hotel chains and perhaps some restaurants were going to benefit. So my argument is that the commercial benefit to the Commonwealth, or as I call them, the Colonial Games, is highly questionable. And if they were so commercially lucrative, why did Australia turn it down? Why did London not do it? I think the answer is plain. They don't want it either because it's a massive money black hole. Anyway, moving on, mentioning commercial benefit brings me to a topic that cropped up midweek, which was unexpected in a way, but it was an agreement signed between the leader of the SNP, John Swinney, and Gordon McIntyre-Kemp of the Business for Scotland organisation. The Business for Scotland organisation, if you haven't heard of it, was set up by Mr. McAlpine. Mr. McAlpine, sorry. Anyway, it was set up in order to look for businesses which favoured independence and to get them on side and to make a collective of businesses who were pro-independence. And in that regard, it was useful, especially back in 2014. And it's still going now. The SNP has been trumpeting this agreement between the SNP and Business for Scotland as a major coup. It's a link-up between as the SNP says it, the party of independence and the movement itself. I would question that a little bit. Gordon McIntyre Kemp is a part of the movement, but Business for Scotland is businesses. It's not the movement. It's businesses, it's companies, it's firms who are either agnostic to independence and are not against it, or are actually for it, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but as far as signing agreements with other people are concerned, I would much rather see the SNP signing an agreement with ALPA and with the ISP and with the Green Party and anyone else in smaller parties who backs independence, because it's the political alliance for independence which is important. The movement for independence, that's you and I, the public, if you like, has its own life. It has its own organisers, it has its own schedule, it has its own events, and these take the form of things like marches and rallies and fundraising activities. They always have. Wouldn't it be better for the SNP to sign agreements with all of those organisations? Pull everyone together. Gordon McIntyre Kemp, I don't object to this. I think this is a first step, but I don't see it as connecting everybody together. I see it as the SNP connecting with businesses which are in favour of independence, and that strikes me as it has a taint of neoliberalism about it. Free market economics are backing independence, but it doesn't look good for Scotland's future if that is the future of commercial activity in Scotland, because it means more foreign investment, more foreign companies owning more of Scotland's resources and exploiting them, because that's what businesses do. Businesses are not, what's the word? They're not political. They don't ally themselves to political ideologies. They just see an opportunity to make money. That's what they do. They're unapologetic about it. That's how it operates. And I think that this agreement signed between Robin McAlpine, sorry, not Robin McAlpine, Gordon, I'll get his name right, Gordon McIntyre Kemp, I beg your pardon, Gordon McIntyre Kemp and John Swinney is more of a way of involving businesses in the SNP's marketing of independence, because businesses market very well. They're good at selling stuff after all. And the SNP having a link to a business organisation like this would be able to get their opinions on certain policies, things like that. So it is useful, I don't deny it. I just think it doesn't go far enough, which is a great shame. The last topic today is human rights. Kenny Badenoch has been on the TV, as usual, the BBC, saying that they plan to abolish or basically remove the European Convention on Human Rights from the British English statute books. It's already embedded in Scots law, removing our human rights. In other words, the protections that we have to speak freely, to think freely, to make programs like this, to march and protest, to demonstrate, and to hold large outdoor gatherings, all of which it seems that the Labour Party in London do not like. And they are claiming, in fact Badenoch was claiming, that some of the protesters in London who were protesting in favour of Palestine were actually taking police away from other crime solving activities and dealing with crimes. You have to ask then, well, if the police shouldn't be there policing these large gatherings, should you not then just cancel all big football matches as well? Because they drag police from their jobs fighting crime to watch a bunch of football supporters. So it seems to be a bit of a double standard going on here. Why is Badenoch all about cancelling marches and rallies, but not about cancelling football matches? Well, I think we know the answer to that. Football matches make money, and making money appears to be what the Labour Party is wanting to stimulate. It's nothing to do with human rights. They don't want people marching in the streets. It doesn't look good for them. It is, I think, one of the founding pillars of any democracy, that you have the right to march and rally in public places much as you like, as long as you're not violent and you don't damage property and you don't abuse other members of the public or cause a fray or anything like that. Now, that has been going on in this country, and I'm talking Scotland here, for centuries. People have demonstrated. They've been allowed to demonstrate most of the time, although there was a very notable atrocity, I think you would call it, perpetrated in Glasgow back in 1917, just towards the end of World War I, when the shipyard workers of Glasgow went on strike in favour of, I think it was a 40-hour working week and better pay and conditions. And there was a rally in George Square. And the British state sent in the troops. In fact, Winston Churchill ordered tanks onto the streets. He put up machine gun nests. And there was a cavalry charge where innocent civilians were attacked by soldiers on horses. And that was what Kimmy Badenoch is really talking about. It's about the right of the British state to put down any demonstration it likes, using the excuse of public order. And this is something which you maybe heard of the Riot Act, and there's a phrase, reading the Riot Act. They actually used to do that. So if there was a public gathering, they would read the Riot Act to the crowd to say, if you don't disperse, it's going to be classed as a riot and you're going to be attacked by police and soldiers, right? This is what she wants a return to. The British state is actually wanting to join in with dictators like Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko of Belarus, who have rejected the European Convention of Human Rights and will not accept its terms. So now Britain has decided that it wants to do the same. And why? Well, Badenoch said, well, Australia came out of it. Oh, well, in that case, it must be fine. If Australia did it, then we should do it as well, shouldn't we? Why? Just because somebody else does something stupid, does it mean we have to do something stupid as well? We've fought for over 3 centuries for our human rights. Women have fought for their rights to vote, for their rights to equal representation at work, for equal pay and conditions. You know, gay and trans and lesbian people have fought for their rights by marching and protesting. Everybody has the right to do this. And this is how societal progress happens in a democracy. Once that stops, we become a totalitarian state, too afraid to go out on the street and even do a little sit-down protest somewhere public with half a dozen people in case we get rounded up by the cops and stuck in jail, because that's really what this is about. So if you don't want to end up like that, the answer to that is quite simple. Get rid of the Union. Take Scotland out of this mess and prevent this from happening. We have a simple choice. In 7 months' time, in May of next year, we get a choice about who we have in our parliament representing us. Now, I know it's not a perfect system. I know it's a British system. I know it's heavily stacked against us. But if, as I said at the top of the programme, the SNP, ALBA, the ISP, the SSP, and all of the other smaller parties had an agreement that they would all fight the next general election on the single issue of independence and nothing else, that would create the homogeneity, the togetherness that this country needs. And if every party did it, especially if the SNP initiated it, because they have an opportunity to do so at the moment, they've shown they can do it with businesses, why not parties and all the rest of us? Because that's what it's going to take. If you want to unite a whole country behind you, you need to be connected to everybody in that country. It's parties, it's businesses, and everyone who's of voting age in this country needs to be connected. And if that doesn't happen, then we're just going to fragment into warring parties again, which is the situation we're in just now. So the SNP, if you're listening to this, and I'm not being anti-SNP here, I'm just saying that you've got a fantastic opportunity here. You've shown that you can do it with Business for Scotland. Why not do it with ALBA? Why not do it with the ISP? Why not do it with everybody? Because if you have an agreement with the whole country and everybody's a party to it, we're all on the same page. And the leadership is then spread over multiple parties, over multiple organisations, and it's much harder for any British state media to target one individual. which is what they like to do. Anyway, that's the end of today's program. I hope you found the content interesting, and if you have, and you want me to keep making more of these programs, then please leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and leave a comment. And share this as widely as you can, because I can only really do this if people keep sharing it and keep helping me to make more content. I'll be back again on your screens towards the end of the week with Norrie Hunter on Friday morning at 9:30 for Hodmajaket. We've had some very, very good responses to our recent programs, and I'm hoping that will keep building our audiences. We're at roughly 3,000 a time now for each show each week, and I'm sure we could get that to 10,000 with your help. Anyway, that's it from Inde-Car today. Remember to keep the faith, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.